The bells of the red keep told the closing of another sweltering day, their sonorous notes rolling through vaulted corridors like distant thunder. In the hush that followed each reverberation, Sansa Stark could feel her own heart ticking in her ears, a small, frightened metronome measuring the seconds until the world she knew collapsed entirely. The air smelled of polished oak, hot stone, and something metallic, fear, perhaps, and she told herself it was only the copper tang of fresh rushes on the floor. Yet every sense insisted danger was already upon her. She stood on a narrow balcony that overlooked the inner courtyards, where the shadows of columns lay stretched thin across pale flagstones. Below, lanterns winked one by one as servants hurried to their dormers. From here she could almost see the high gate where her father had once ridden through in lordly grace, honored and unbowed. Now he languished in a tower cell, branded a traitor, and she, his daughter, was hostage to a queen who smiled with lips that knew poison as easily as prayer. A soft scrape of leather on stone startled her. She spun, skirts whispering, and found only moon silver pooling at her feet. For a moment she feared it a Lannister guard come to drag her before the queen again, to make her plead anew for mercy she could not name. But the corridor was empty, save for a shadow that wasn't there a heartbeat before. "Little bird must keep her wings folded," said a low voice, lilting, each word balanced like a water dancer's step. Sansa's breath caught. Syrio Forel stepped from the darkness, more silhouette than man, his cropped salt and pepper hair glinting. He wore no armor, only a dark wool jerkin belted tight and soft leather boots that made scarcely a whisper. The Braavosi master's eyes, bright as polished jet, studied her with calm intensity. "And my Lady Septa says I am to stay in my chambers after sunset," Sansa stammered, even as she realized how foolish it sounded. The Septa was gone these 10 days, dismissed after one whispered complaint by Joffrey. Yet formality clung to Sansa like a last layer of silk. "Septa Mordane is far away," Syrio said, voice gentle but urgent. "And the queen's dogs are hungry tonight." "Come?" "There is little time." Questions warred with dread. "Arya?" she began, for her sister was somewhere in this great sprawl of stone as well, vanished after their father's arrest. "The wolf girl runs in shadows even I cannot catch," he answered. "But you I can guard if the gods are kind." She should have run from him, she thought. Run to her bedchamber, bar the door, wait for hound or queen or fate. Yet Sirio's presence carried a strange reassurance, as if the very air steadied around him. She remembered Arya's tales of wooden swords and quick, laughing blows in the yard. The first sword of bravos who parried truth from lies. Syrio offered a slim-knuckled hand. "Will you fly, little bird? Or stay in a gilded cage until the song ends?" Words dried in her mouth. She placed her fingers in his. His grip was light, but unbreakable. They moved through servants' passages dimmer than night, where pale-washed walls held the chill of cellars beneath Dragonstone. The corridors narrowed, slanted, open to stairwells that spiraled like coiled serpents. Sansa fought to keep her skirts silent, heart thunderous. Syrio glided ahead, pausing at each corner, listening with every part of his frame, head cocked, shoulders breathing caution. Distantly, footsteps rang on a grander floor, heavy, armored, merciless. Lannister gold cloaks barking orders. Sansa flinched. Syrio pressed a finger to her lips. They slipped behind a tapestry depicting Aegon's dragons, into a crawlspace where dust danced in the small glow of his shuttered lantern. "Know this place?" he whispered. She shook her head, curls brushing rough stone. "Good. Then the queen knows it less." A flash of humor lit his eyes, then vanished in the dark. The tight passage carried them above vaulted kitchens, where fires crackled in iron grates and the smell of roasted lamb drifted upward like taunts. Sansa's stomach nodded. She had eaten but a few sugared plums since dawn. Hunger, however, felt trivial next to the terror of capture. A ladder led them down to an unused pantry, barrels crusted with salt fish, sacks of old flour, and a spidery window so small only vermin passed freely. Syrio pried a stone loose near the floor. Cold air washed over them, tinged with river damp. "The Blackwater," he said. "Smell her? She is freedom for those who dare the night." Sansa's courage faltered. "Ser Island guards the river gates," she whispered. "And the queen has spies. Even the gutter rats serve her coin." Syrio crouched until his eyes met hers level. "Truth. But water dancers trust their feet, not their fears." He drew a narrow blade, no wider than a child's finger, from a sheath at his sleeve. It shimmered with oil. "Tonight, whispers walk on tiptoe." He let her see the blade, then slid it away. Promise enough. The loose stone opened to a half-collapsed tunnel, ancient, lined by roots thick as wrists. He guided her into the earth and replaced the stone behind them, sealing darkness like a vault. Only the faintest lantern light bled through his cupped hand. They crept. Water dripped steady as a pulse. Sansa's slippers soaked through. Mud sucked at her soles. She tasted iron in the air, old blood, or deep earth. Memories flickered. Mother's tales of crypts beneath Winterfell, echoing with the song of lost kings. Here, far south, she felt equally entombed and protected. "Why help me?" she asked after what felt an hour of crawling. "The Queen's men will put a price on your head." Syrio chuckled under his breath. "A head is only worth its stories. In Bravos, I was paid to kill men who stalked children. I refused orders for lesser crimes. Why should I pawn my honor to a lioness who slaughters songs?" He paused, lantern high. "You are a Stark. Your heart beats to a rhythm different from Southron courts. If you die here, the world loses music." Her throat tightened at the thought of Winterfell's godswood, the hush punctuated by falling leaves. She lowered her gaze lest tears betray her. They emerged into a cistern reeking of algae, where moonlight poured through cracks in a half-sealed grate. Syrio slipped through first, then helped her climb moss-slick stones. The grate opened upon a drainage channel that ran along the base of the keep's outer wall. Beyond lay a jumble of market shacks hugging the fortifications, the shantytown known as Maegor's Shadow. Night cloaked the stalls in shabby curtains. Only embers glowed beneath shuttered braziers. Stray dogs rooted for scraps. Sansa's pale gown would shine like a beacon here. Syrio produced a cloak dyed a coarse, undyed gray, and draped it across her shoulders. "A gift from a silent sister," he said. "Death passes unremarked in these colors." They threaded through alleys carpeted with trodden straw and rotting fruit. Twice Syrio halted, finger raised, and a pair of gold cloaks patrolled past, torches sputtering. When they were alone again, he pressed on with the surety of a map reader. Near the riverfront, wooden pilings jutted over black water. A skiff waited, moored by frayed rope. Its oarsman lounged in shadow, tall, hood drawn low. As Sansa neared, he turned, and lantern light kissed the nubs of ears half-chewed by frost. The stranger nodded once at Syrio, then offered Sansa a roughened hand to steady her into the shallow hull. "No words," Syrio instructed. "Names are arrows, we need none." The oars bit the Blackwater's glassy surface, sound swallowed by night. The skiff glided between anchored cogs and fishing boats, their hulls black shapes against starlight. Far to the east, the moon rose orange, a coin tossed over distant Essos. Sansa drew the hood tighter, shivering, not from cold, from enormity. She was leaving King's Landing, the court she had dreamed of since girlhood. She whispered silent farewells, to Septa Mordane's lessons on courtesies, to the thorny laughter of the Tyrell bannermen, to a golden prince who revealed himself a monster no lullaby could soothe. Halfway across the river, drums rolled faint and ominous behind them. Fires flared atop the city walls, alarm beacons. Sansa gasped. Syrio watched the flicker without turning the boat. "They know," she said. "They will close every gate, search the river." Panic rose like bile. Syrio's smile flashed fox quick. "Let them search a city of masks. A dancer's best ally is misdirection." He tapped the hull softly. Beneath the planks, Sansa felt an odd buoyancy. She followed his gaze to see a dozen empty wine casks lashed beneath the skiff, their barrels providing unnatural lift. "They will suspect larger vessels," he said. not a puddle jumper disguised as flotsam. Still, she could not shake dread. If they capture you, then I shall tell the queen the little bird flew north on dragon wings. He shrugged. And perhaps she will feed me to her hounds, or perhaps she'll tire of the game. Until then, I breathe. Ashore loomed marshy banks where reeds whispered with each passing breeze. The oarsman grounded the skiff on soft mud and leapt out, hauling them to land. Sansa's slippers sank, soaking her ankles. Beyond the reeds stretched a goat path leading into a stand of willow and alder. Torches glittered on the river but did not approach. Syrio disembarked and bowed low, as if beneath the chandeliers of the Red Keep ballroom rather than under dripping leaves. My lady, your road continues alone now. Alone. The word struck colder than the river. You're not coming? South of the city, 2 riders wait. They know the royal causeway well and shall bear you beyond the reach of gold cloaks. I must return, leave different footprints, else the trail points to you. She reached for him, startling them both. Will I ever see you again? Perhaps in Bravos, he said, eyes gentle. Or in a place where swords dance no longer. He pressed something into her palm. A small wooden dragon, carved crudely, lacquer-worn with age. Tell the man who rides a dapple mare that the crab has flown. He will answer that the sea is wide. Speak then my name, and he will obey you. She closed fingers around the token, its edges digging into flesh. Why a dragon? It was carved by a friend who sailed farther than any winds know. It reminds me that even monsters can be beautiful. He bowed once more, then signaled the oarsman, who shoved off without sound, swallowed again by night. Sansa watched until skiff and river were one. Then she turned down the path, braid heavy between her shoulder blades, heart heavier still. Each step whispered the same prayer, north, north, north. Clouds drifted across the moon. Crickets thrummed unseen. Somewhere an owl hooted, wide-eyed and lonely. She hastened, cloak snagging briars, until the trees gave way to a moonlit meadow where a collapsed stone chapel leaned like a drunk remembering hymns. 2 horses waited in its shadow, one dark as molasses, the other speckled silver. A man stood between them, buckling saddlebags. He was lean, with the stooped shoulders of long riding, but when he straightened, Sansa caught a profile etched in hard angles. Prominent nose, scar across chin. His eyes, one brown, one milky white, regarded her, unreadable. The crab has flown, she whispered, clutching the dragon. He inclined his head. The sea is wide. His voice was rough as gravel. Relief flooded her, leaving knees weak. He examined the carving, pocketed it, then gestured to the dapple mare. This one is yours, my lady. She is quick, though skittish. Sansa mounted awkwardly, skirts tangling. The rider adjusted stirrup straps with surprising gentleness. He handed her a water skin and a bundle of bread and cheese. Eat when safe, he advised. What is your name? She asked. He stared a moment, unreadable, then swung onto the dark gelding. Names are for friends, he said, and we are wind tonight. He wheeled horse toward a game trail leading south-southwest. Sansa's mare pricked ears, sensing flight. She gathered reins. Where are we bound? To a fishing village called Stonehelm, he said. From there, a ship to White Harbor, God's willing. North. The word burned bright. She nodded, and they urged horses into a trot that soon became a canter across moon-washed fields. Each hoofbeat drummed a litany. Father, Arya, Mother, Robb, Bran, Rickon, Winterfell. Behind them, on far walls of the Red Keep, torches flickered like angry stars. Yet the night wind carried scent of distant pines, and with it the memory of snow. Sansa Stark, lady hostage, courtly dreamer, broken bird, leaned forward into the gallop, and for the first time since courtly dances in Winterfell's great hall, she felt the thrum of freedom beneath her bones. They rode until dawn stained the sky faint rose. Sunlight revealed green rolling hills, sleepy farmsteads, and the distant glimmer of the King's Road. The rider slowed at a stone bridge where cold mist drifted above a creek. He dismounted, checked hooves, and offered Sansa a dried fig from his pouch. "We make south to fool the hounds," he explained. "Then hook west to Blackwater Rush Ford. By night we double back north." She nodded, though the maze of directions spun her senses. "Do Lannisters know this route?" He spat into the creek. "Lannisters know gold and gates. They distrust mud and shadows." They rested but a quarter hour before remounting. Each mile carried Sansa farther from the girl who once dreamed of songs and silken banners. In her place, a quieter figure took shape, one who measured safety in hoofbeats and hedge shadows, who ate coarse bread without complaint, who let wind erase the perfume of lemon cakes from her memory. On the third night, they reached the ford beneath willow arcades, water curling black and deep. Fireflies stitched golden constellations among reeds. The rider prayed softly, old words of the Rhoynar Sansa guessed, and led the horses across slippery stones. Midway, the gelding balked, snorting. The rider soothed him, but a splash upriver snapped both their heads. Shapes swirling, voices low. Sansa's pulse hammered. The rider motioned her toward a fallen log at the bank's edge. She crouched, heart in throat, while he melted into shadows with knocked arrow. Moonlight broke from clouds, revealing 3 men in half armor edging the ford on foot. Gold clasps glittered at their cloaks. A fourth held reins of a tired palfrey on the far bank. Their whispers carried. Sansa caught fragments. "Girl, Syrio, Queen's orders." She froze. The rider's longbow hummed, arrow slicing night, striking a helmeted brow. The man toppled into water. Chaos erupted, shouts, sword steel. The rider loosed 2 more shafts. One guard dropped, quivering. The third lunged behind boulders, shield raised. From her log cover, Sansa saw the river horse rear. The fourth man struggled to calm it. In that instant, the rider seized an axe from his saddle, waded knee-deep, and swept the blade in a brutal arc. Steel met helm with a hollow clang. The guard crumpled, half in water. The last survivor fled toward willows. The rider let him run. He knelt beside Sansa. "They will send more. We cannot stay to bury." His gaze softened at her pale face. "You saw blood before? Once?" she whispered, recalling Lady's unjust death. This was fouler, men slain for her. She swallowed nausea. "Let us go." They rode hard through dun fields until dawn. Sansa's thoughts whirled. Syrio's thin smile, the collapse of her safe illusions, her father rotting in a black cell. She pressed gloved fingers to her temples, as if to hold memory in place. 3 nights later they reached Stonehelm, a crumbling port smelling of tar and fish guts. A one-masted trader rocked at the wharf, its paint peeling. The captain, a stout woman with an eye patch of faded blue silk, bartered with the rider in murmurs. Coin changed hands, stacks of silver stags glinting in lanternlight. She glanced at Sansa once, expression unreadable beneath tangled gray hair. "Dawn tide," the captain rasped. "White Harbor if currents oblige, Sisterton if not." The rider turned to Sansa. "This is where we part." A cold wind rose off the bight, flapping sails, tugging Sansa's hood. "Will you not sail with us?" she asked, fearing his answer. "Tracks must scatter." He touched the pommel of his sword. "If lion banners ride south, I lead them astray. North needs you, my lady." She felt suddenly small beside the tide's roar, the salt-bitten vessel, the vast leagues yet to Winterfell. But she straightened. "Thank you, friend," she said, and dared kiss his weathered cheek. He blinked, faint color blooming. On deck she found a berth no larger than a cupboard, smelling of pitch and wool. She lay awake, the slap of waves beneath planks echoing the drum of her heart. Outside, gulls screeched, rigging groaned. She imagined direwolves howling under moonlit pines, her brothers stringing bows, her mother's arms waiting. Morning painted the horizon with molten gold. Sails snapped open, salt spray kissed her lips, and Stonehelm dwindled to a blur. Sansa braced at the rail, hair whipping, and allowed herself a single, fragile smile. Syrio had set her upon a path awash with peril, yet each league northward felt like a thread sewing her soul back together. She would cross storms, evade hunters, barter with smugglers, endure the harsh glances of strangers who saw only a silent girl in gray. She would sharpen grief into purpose. She would remember the feel of Syrio's steady hand and the rider's flinty courage. Somewhere beyond the curve of sea and sky, Winterfell waited. She pictured its ancient towers wreathed in snowmelt mist, smoke spiraling from great stone chimneys. The gods would whispering secrets to red leaves. She would reach it or die upon the road. But for now, wind filled the sails with promise, and the little bird, once caged in crimson walls, soared upon unseen currents toward home. The salty air of the narrow sea lodged itself in Sansa's throat like a bittersweet memory. She surfaced from restless slumber to the groan of straining timbers, the hush-hush slap of waves against the trader's hull, and the distant screech of gulls that seemed to laugh at mortal worries. Her narrow berth, little more than a shelf hacked into the forecastle, reeked of tar, wet wool, and last night's onion stew. Yet she found the scent oddly comforting, for it spoke of motion, of distance, of a horizon widening with every creak of the ship's bones. When she rolled onto her side, a sliver of dawn filtered through a knot-hole in the planks, tracing a pale bar across her cheek. She lay there a long moment, letting the rise and fall carry her, until the ache of cramped limbs drove her upright. Her dress, the same dove-gray gown she had worn beneath the Red Keep, hung on a peg, still stained at the hem with river mud. In the narrow corridor beyond her berth, she heard sailors cursing softly in the Bravosi tongue as they hauled on lines. Every thudding footstep above sent dust motes swirling in the beam of light. When Sansa emerged onto the weather deck, the night's mists had thinned to gauze. Overhead stretched a sky swirled in lavender, as if some cosmic painter had taken a careless brush to the heavens. The trader yawed gently south of the coast, its single tanbark sail bellied by a lazy morning breeze. Gallows birds perched on the yardarm, peering down with greedy black eyes. The captain, Madame Nellamores, though the crew called her Old Nellie, stood braced at the tiller, pipe clenched in her one good side of teeth. Her midnight hair, streaked by silver, slapped against the pale linen scarf that bound her missing eye. She lifted a finger as Sansa ascended the ladder from the waist. "Morning's bite is sharp, little gray," she rasped around her stem. "Better keep the hood." Sansa nodded, drawing the wool close. "How far to White Harbor, Captain?" Nellie spat a grain of tobacco. "Currents V turned kinder than the King's Court. 3, mayhap 4 days if the wind holds." Her lone eye settled on Sansa's face with something like pity. "You'll want to break your fast. Galle'll have porridge thick enough to mortar a wall." A wink. "Better than court food. Less poison." Sansa managed a wry smile. "Thank you." She started for the companionway but stopped. "Captain, have any riders come to the docks in pursuit of a girl?" Nellie blew a smoke ring that drifted like a halo before it shredded in the wind. "Dock warden told me gold cloaks asked after smugglers and stolen silks. No word of highborn birds." She eyed Sansa's gray cloak. "Could be they're chasing elsewhere. Kingslayer has many nets in those waters, but fish too many to count." At the rail, Sansa stared north. Though the coast lay barely a faint smudge, she imagined she could already smell pine forests, hearth smoke curling from Winterfell's chimneys, even the crisp tang of snow. Her breath caught. If only father could see these waters, clasp her hands, promise all would come right. She brushed away the thought before it grew claws. Breakfast was indeed a mortar of oats, sweetened with honey scraped from a cracked comb. She ate quickly, the warm mush fortifying her against the deck's chill. Around her, sailors swapped ribald jokes, patched sails, sharpened boarding knives. None troubled her, though she caught their glances when they thought her head bowed. They sensed she was different by bearing, by the softness of her hands, by the half-remembered courtesy with which she thanked the cook. But sailors lived side by side with secrets. Treasure chests, hidden love letters, unwanted babes delivered between tides. A silent girl in drab cloth was no extraordinary sight. Long hours passed beneath a sun that brightened from peach to molten gold. Sansa busied herself mending a rent in her skirt with needle and coarse thread borrowed from the bosun. The repetitive motion calmed her. Each pull of the needle through fabric a heartbeat counted, a mile towards safety. Between stitches, she watched gulls wool overhead, envying their unbound flight. By mid-afternoon, clouds gathered like conspirators along the western horizon, bruised purple and green. The wind freshened, snapping the sail taut enough to whine. Old Nellie barked orders. Men raced aloft to reef canvas. Sansa tied off her thread, stowed needle, and steadied herself against a coil of hemp as the first fat drops splattered the deck. The squall struck with sudden fury. Sheets of rain hammered the trader, drumming on the deck so fiercely that speech became futile. Lightning forked the heavens. Thunder rolled across the low waves like a charge of ghostly cavalry. The sea, once calm, reared up in white-capped ridges. Each crest sent the vessel lurching, masts swaying with a mournful moan. Sansa clung to the rail, soaked, heart pounding in her throat. Visions flashed, tyrants in golden crowns, Ser Island's executioner axe gleaming, her father's gray face in a tower cell. She squeezed her eyes shut and tried to recite a list of Winterfell's kings to steady herself. Brandon the Builder, Torrhen the King who knelt Edric Snowbeard. A sudden crack made her gasp. The foremast whined, rigging screaming with the strain. A gust careened off the half-furled sail, yanking the vessel sideways. Sansa tasted bile as her stomach dropped. She fell to one knee, palms braced on wet planks. All around her sailors shouted in half a dozen tongues, struggling to secure ropes and ride out the squall. Through the deluge, old Nellie steadied the tiller like a queen steering into battle. Lightning illuminated her eye patch, her grim grin. "Bear up," she roared. "She's a fat cow, but she floats." Another wave slammed broadside. Sansa lost her grip, sliding until her shoulder collided with a stack of barrels lashed tight to the forecastle. Pain burst through her collarbone. She scrambled upright, coughing seawater. A hand closed around her arm, calloused, strong. She blinked rain from her eyes and saw the ship's mate, a fair-skinned Northman called Hagen, his long blonde beard plastered to his chest. "Below, milady," he bellowed close to her ear. "Lash yourself in the hold. Storm will break soon enough." She nodded, numb with shock, and followed him across a heaving deck that seemed intent on throwing her to the hungry waves. At the hatch, he thrust her through, then vanished back into the fray, clanging the hatch shut behind him. Darkness swallowed her. She groped along the ladder, sea shifting beneath her boots, until her foot found the step. Down she crept into the hold proper, rank with bilge, lamp oil, and mildew. Here lanterns swung from bulkheads, their meager glow dancing over crates of dried cod and casks of red dye bound for bravos. Chains groaned as cargo shifted within its netting. Sansa staggered to a stack of grain sacks, wedged herself between them, and wrapped an arm through the netting. For a time beyond measure, she rode the ship's violent seesaw, teeth rattling, eyes squeezed shut. Memories intruded. The September of Baelor's Steps thronged by a snarling mob. Queen Cersei's mocking smile, Joffrey's cold, delighted menace as he ordered Micah's death. The feel of Ser Island's thick leather gloves on her shoulder as he twisted her to face the crowd. The hold's darkness became those scenes, flickering like lightning across the long corridors of her mind. She did not realize she had begun to weep until a calm silence wrapped the hull. The thunder's voice retreated, the deck's tilt gentled, and somewhere overhead she heard the victorious whoop of sailors. Rain's drum slowed to a patter. Eventually Hagen opened the hatch again, lantern in fist. His beard dripped, eyes red-rimmed with fatigue, yet he smiled. "Storm's belly split," he announced. "She's thrown her worst." Sansa unhooked herself, legs trembling, and followed him upward. The world smelled new. The rain had left the deck gleaming like polished obsidian. Puddles mirrored clouds that now parted to reveal a bruised sunset, violet and rose, double-edged with gold. A faint rainbow arched above the horizon as if the gods offered apology for their temper. Old Nellie clapped Sansa's shoulder with a wet, heavy palm, nearly buckling her knees. "Well-weathered, little gray. You've a stronger stomach than half my men." She gestured toward the horizon, where gulls again dipped and cried. "Storm's blown us a league east. Good current. We may shave a day off the crossing." Sansa smiled weakly. "Thank the mother for small mercies." Her voice came raw, but her spirit felt oddly lighter, as if the storm had scoured her grief and left behind clean resolve. That night, she lay on her berth listening to the hush of calmer waves. The ship rocked gently, lullaby-like. She traced the carved wooden dragon Syrio had given her, hidden in her bodice by day, clutched in her palm when darkness fell. She wondered if he still lived, if Queen Cersei's hounds had sniffed his trail. She pictured him sparring in some narrow court, sword flickering, feet dancing with grace and audacity. She whispered a silent prayer to the many-faced god, whom Braavosi revered, though she knew little of its rites. As sleep took her, she dreamt of direwolves running across a snowy field. But when she knelt beside one to bury her fingers in its fur, the wolf became a crow, feathers midnight black, eyes red as coals. It caught a warning she could not understand, then burst into 1,000 fluttering quills. She woke with a start, heart hammering. 2 more uneventful days passed. The trader sailed north along the Bight, hugging the lee of sodden cliffs. Sansa helped coil lines, scrubbed salt from railings, and surprised herself by laughing at a sailor's bawdy limerick. She felt the bruise blooming across her shoulder each time she lifted a bucket, but pain became a familiar companion, dulled by routine. On the 4th dawn, seabirds grew more numerous, wheeling over choppy waters. Hagen pointed north where a pale smudge rose from mist. "There's your castle of tides. White Harbor, see? Merman's court sits yonder behind those walls." His tone carried no judgment, only polite interest. Sansa craned her neck. The smudge soon resolved into limestone ramparts catching morning sun like bleached bone. Above them soared the Mander Keep, tall, elegant, crowned by the flutter of house banners stitched with the Merman of House Manderley. Tears welled unbidden. That banner meant safety, meant the north. The trader eased into the harbor amid fat-bellied cogs and lean fishing skiffs. Dockhands shouted greetings in thick-tongued accents while gulls fought over spilled entrails. Old Nellie guided the ship expertly beside a moss-coated piling, and her crew leapt to tie off lines. Before the gangplank dropped, Nellie beckoned Sansa to her cabin. The small space smelled of pipeweed and brine. From a coffer she drew out a bundle of dark green cloth. "A cloak lined in rabbit fur," she explained. "Northman cold bites worse than any queen's words. Take it as payment for your sewing help." Sansa's throat tightened. She accepted with both hands. "You've been kinder than my own kin, Captain. I wish I had coin to repay." Nellie waved off the notion. "Keep your coins. When the world rights itself, send me a cask of Wintertown's mead. We'll call it even." Her good eye grew flinty. "But mind you keep your head down. Lannister ears are longer than a giraffe's prick." On the gangplank, Hagen pressed a small parcel into her glove. "Dried apples," he muttered, "for the road." "Thank you," she mouthed. She stepped onto White Harbor's stone quay and drew a deep breath of fish, coal smoke, and the faint perfume of distant spruce. For the first time since King's Landing, she felt she might truly belong somewhere again. She did not belong long to a simple quay. A tall man in quilted blue-gray doublet approached, flanked by 2 Manderley guards in sea-green cloaks. His beard was trimmed close, streaked with white. He carried a rolled parchment impressed with a seal of pale wax. "I seek passage lists from Braavos," he announced in a voice polished by years of court ceremony. Sansa's heart stuttered. She recognized him, Ser Lothier Locke, sworn man to House Manderley, present at Winterfell when King Robert visited. She hesitated, hood pulled low. Could she trust him? Yet she had little choice. This was still Stark country. She let her hood fall, stepped forward. "Ser Lothier," she said softly. His eyes widened. "7 save me, Lady Sansa?" She nodded, tears threatening. He hustled her away from prying sailors into a warehouse scented of salt fish and tallow. There he knelt upon one knee. "Your lady mother fears you dead. Word of your father's disgrace broke hearts across the north. To see you safe is a miracle." She placed fingertips on his shoulder, bidding him rise. "My father lives in King's Landing, though imprisoned," she whispered. "I must reach Winterfell. Will you help?" Ser Lothier swallowed. "It will be my honor," yet concern clouded his gaze. "But Lady Stark has ridden south with a retinue, seeking justice from the king. Winterfell is held by Lord Robb, now raising banners for war." War. The word tasted like snowmelt on her lips. Already, Robb rode to Moat Cailin 3 days past, summoning Great John Umber and Galbart Glover. Rumor puts him at the neck soon, accounting to march south. He exhaled. The North will not stand idle while Lord Eddard is kept in chains. Sansa fought dizziness. War on top of father's peril, all because a king desired a pet wolf cornered. She hugged her cloak. "Take me to my brother," Ser Lothier considered. "The King's Road is thick with scouts loyal to Lannister and to the Boltons, who would curry favor with either side. Safer to ride by woodland trails. I will gather 3 others and fresh mounts. We leave within the hour, if that pleases." Pleased more than she could say. He ushered her to the Merman's Court, White Harbor's marble-veined fortress perched above the port, and secured provisions. Salted pork, hard cheese, hogshead of ale, fresh arrowheads. Sansa waited in a guest solar of bluestone warmed by a brazier. She sipped spiced cider and listened to gulls while servants dried her gray cloak by the coals. When Ser Lothier returned, he bore not only parcels but a long, slim dagger in a doeskin sheath. He offered it pommel first. "A lady's dirk," he explained, "forged by Mott the armorer in Gulltown. It is light yet true." Sansa recoiled at first, the memory of blood still on the ford. But she accepted, fastening it beneath her new green cloak. The weight felt alien yet strangely empowering. They departed White Harbor at dusk, slipping out the south gate beneath a strawberry sky. 8 riders. Ser Lothier, 3 men-at-arms, 1 lady disguised as a lesser noble's ward, and 3 pack horses laden with food and winter furs. Sansa rode a chestnut palfrey named Daisy, whose even gait soothed her nerves. The path hugged the White Knife River, winding through alder thickets humming with summer gnats. They spoke little. Hoofbeats and birdsong filled the twilight. At camp they chose secluded glades, posted watches, and banked fires low with earth to avoid detection. Each morning, Ser Lothier consulted a weathered map, veering east over mossy ridges and fens rather than risk the King's Road proper. After 4 days, they reached the forests of the Rills, green labyrinths spiced with pine and wild mint. Sansa rode in quiet awe beneath towering sentinels, shafts of sunlight painting mosaics on the needle-strewn floor. She thought of Bran's stories of the children of the forest and half-expected tiny leaf-clad shadows to dart among roots. On the 5th afternoon, as their column ascended a ferny slope, a thrush burst from underbrush with a frantic twitter. Ser Lothier reined in, signaling silence. The men-at-arms knocked arrows. Sansa's heartbeat thundered. Through a break in the trees, she glimpsed armored riders traversing a valley below. Bastard swords gleaming, surcoats of pink flayed man on red. Bolton scouts. Ser Lothier beckoned her close. "We must circle wide," he whispered, "and cross the Green Fork at Breakneck Ford instead of the Stone Bridge. Lord Bolton's men pledge fealty to Robb. Aye, but his bastard commands some who sniff their own profit." Sansa recalled whispered tales of Ramsay Snow's cruelty. Skinned men hung in Winterfell's walls like leavings in a butcher shop. She shuddered. "Let us avoid them." They doubled back, clopping beneath low-slung branches. The delay cost 2 days, during which a bone-deep drizzle soaked them and churned paths to sludge. Sansa's cloak smelled of wet dog. Daisy's flank grew lathered with mud. Yet she pressed on. One gray dawn they crested a ridge and found fog blanketing a wide moor where gnarled thorn bushes clawed the mist. Ser Lothier dismounted, motioning to his men. "We rest the horses and walk them through. Fog hides scents but muffles footfalls." He helped Sansa down. The ground sucked at their boots, peat squelching. Halfway across, a howl sliced the hush, low, marrow deep. Another answered to their left, then a third behind. Wolves. The men tightened grips on spear hafts. Sansa's blood ran cold. She thought of Lady, of dire wolves, of fate's cruel twists. The first wolf padded into view atop a hummock. Lean, ragged, fur matted by starvation. Its yellow eyes glinted. Two more slunk behind, ribs showing beneath silver pelts. Daisy snorted, stamping. One packhorse whinnied. Ser Lothier stepped forward, spear leveled. "Back, beasts," he barked. The wolves fanned, growls braiding with the fog. They were desperate, half-mad with hunger. Sansa, heart hammering, fumbled at her belt. The dirk felt small compared to snarling jaws. A thrum of bowstring cracked the mist. One wolf yelped, arrow sprouting from its haunch. A second arrow hissed past, but the pack surged in frenzy. Men shouted. Steel flashed. The world became a tangle of gray shapes and crimson spurts. Sansa found herself beside Daisy, blade raised though her hand shook violently. A wolf lunged. She slashed in panic. The blade sliced the creature's ear, but its inertia knocked her sprawling. She felt hot breath, saw teeth snap inches from her face. Then Ser Lothier's boot crashed into its ribs. He speared the beast through the heart and hauled Sansa upright with his free hand. Moments later, it was over. 3 wolves lay still, 2 fled yelping. A man-at-arms nursed a torn calf but could stand. Daisy bore a shallow bite to her hind leg. Sansa's dress was spattered crimson, though she herself was unbitten. Shock left her shaking. Ser Lothier pressed a wineskin to her lips. "A nip of brandy, milady." She drank. The burn steadied her. "Thank you," she rasped. She stared at the wolf she'd scratched. Blood darkened its tongue, but its eyes had already clouded. She whispered a prayer to the old gods, for the beast, and for the girl she once was, innocent of death. They limped onward, reaching Breakneck Ford at dusk. There they found a charred bridge, the work of retreating bandits, and were forced to cross on foot where shallows burbled over slick stones. The packhorse stumbled, tumbling a crate of bread into the current. They salvaged what they could, soaked. That night's campfire burned low, damp with sputtering. Sansa sat wrapped in a blanket beside Ser Lothier, who sharpened his sword. "We are 3 days' ride from the neck," he said. "Robb's host should be near Moat Cailin by now. Word is Lord Frey may grant passage over the Twins." The Twins? Sansa imagined the river fortress. Twin keeps straddling the Green Fork, lorded by the crotchety, many-married Walder Frey. Father had spoken of him with exasperated respect. She drew her knees close. "If we catch Robb's army, will we ride south to free Father? If the gods are just," Ser Lothier answered, edge scraping whetstone. "Yet war seldom bows to justice. It bends to swords and silver." Sansa stared into embers until her eyes prickled. She remembered songs of heroes, gallant Jaime the Dragonslayer, Florus the Fox, who rode into battle with hearts of valor and came home crowned in flowers. Reality proved humbler. Wet boots, fear, hunger, friends lost to wolf fangs. She slept fitful. Dreams returned. Crows spiraling, wolves gnawing at iron gates, a dragon carved of wood that burned in her palm without flame. Morning brought a rumble beneath clouded sky. Hoofbeats, distant yet resolute. Scouts. Ser Lothier urged the group into a copse of aspen. They waited, barely breathing. The thunder swelled, an army on the march. Through branches, soldiers emerged. Standards of stark direwolf snapping, banners of the Karstarks and Tully trout interwoven. The sight near filled Sansa with relief. Ser Lothier stepped onto the track, raised his helm. "Halloo, friends of Winterfell!" A knot of outriders trotted ahead, spears leveled. One lifted visor, gray eyes beneath a battered helm. "Ser Lothier Locke? By the Seven, is that you?" He dismounted, clasped arms. Sansa recognized him too, Jory Castle's cousin Donnell, once a stable hand turned squire. When Donnell saw Sansa, his face transformed. A child glimpsing a miracle. He knelt, choked by tears. "My Lady Sansa Stark, we feared. Your brother must know at once." They escorted her down the King's Road that now teemed with northern men. Wool-clad SMA. Folk carrying pitchforks, grim knights in mail, great lords in sable cloaks. Horns blew directions, wagons creaked, smiths hammered horseshoes on makeshift anvils. Fires smoked, roasting hares and oats. The smell of sweat, steel, and anticipation hung thick. It seemed all the north had shaken off winter slumber and come south to seek redress. Donnell guided her through canvas pavilions to a tall command tent marked by the direwolf standard. Outside, Grey Wind, Robb's direwolf, sat on haunches, muzzle stained with rabbit blood. At Sansa's approach he sniffed, ears pricking. She froze as the beast padded forward. Memories flickered. Lady's gentle nuzzle, muffled whimpers in the September's crypt. Grey Wind lowered his head, sniffed her cloak, then licked her hand with a tongue rough as sandstone. Sansa laughed through tears, stroking his thick fur. The tent flap opened. Robb Stark stepped out clad in chainmail burnished to silver, auburn hair unbound, cheeks still boyish but eyes weathered. At sight of Sansa his breath caught. He moved instinctively, arms wide. She ran to him, burying her face against cool mail. He crushed her close, voice raw. "Little sister." Tears soaked them both. Around them, soldiers paused, heads bowed. Inside the tent, Ser Brynden Tully and Roose Bolton studied maps. Maester Luwin rummaged in a chest of bandages. All stared in muted shock as Sansa entered, Robb's arm around her shoulders. Brynden recovered first. "Gods be kind, Lady Sansa." He bowed, shaggy hair brushing his brow. Maester Luwin's eyes widened behind half-moon spectacles. "My dear girl, you are safe?" Sansa sat on a camp stool, trembling with relief. She recounted her escape in halting sing-song. Syrio's arrival, the tunnel, the skiff, the traitor, wolves in the fog. She spoke of father, alive yet captive, of the Queen's cruelty, of Joffrey's sadism. When she finished, silence settled. Robb's fists clenched white. "They will pay," he said quietly. "Every last lion." Grey Wind growled as if echoing. Roose Bolton's pale eyes flickered. "We must weigh emotion against stratagem. A hostage returned offers leverage." Brynden snorted. "Leverage? The lions hold Ned Stark and Sansa's little sister, assuming Arya lives still. They will not trade father for daughter." He shook his grizzled head. "But Lady Sansa's presence strengthens our claim of Lannister villainy. The realm will hear it." Sansa lifted chin. "If words can save father, I will speak them before any lord. But if swords must answer, I will see justice done." Her voice surprised even her. Robb's stern gaze softened. "You will not be asked to fight," he said. "You fight for me, I must fight for truth." She answered, calmer now. That night, a feast hastily thrown in her honor warmed camp spirits. Hunters roasted a boar. Minstrels strummed harps tuned to the old northern modes, haunting modal airs that curled like wood smoke. Sansa sat by the main fire, sipping watered ale. She wore a simple gown gifted by Lady Manderly, dyed dusky blue, stitched at cuffs with tiny silver trout, a symbol of her mother's house. Her hair she braided in the northern style, loops pinned behind her head. Robb approached with parchment. "Lord Walder Frey agrees to open the twins, in exchange for certain marriages." He grimaced. "Catelyn rides to treat. We march tomorrow." Sansa swallowed. "Then I shall join the host." "Safer you remain with the baggage train," he protested. "Safer perhaps, but father's fate rests on this army. Let me ride at your side, even if well behind the lines." She looked toward the dark horizon where distant fires dotted the King's Road. "I will not cower again." Robb studied her, admiration and worry warring. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, but you ride under guard." The moon rose full, painting the camp in pale luminescence. Sansa wandered to the edge of tents where silent fields stretched, dew-silvered. Grey Wind followed, silent sentinel. She drew the wooden dragon from her bodice, rolling it between fingers. grainy texture soothed her. She thought of Syrio somewhere behind enemy lines, of the unnamed rider who had risked life, of old Nella's single blue eye watching horizons. So many strangers had built a bridge of small acts that carried her here. She vowed she would repay, not in coin but in courage. Above, the moonlight haloed the direwolf banner. Tomorrow the host would cross the Green Fork, bound for war. She, Sansa Stark, a little bird no longer, would step onto history's stage not as ornament, but as witness and weaver of fates. She exhaled, the breath turning to mist, and whispered to the night, "I am of the north, hear me." Gray wind lifted his muzzle and howled, a long, soul-deep note that echoed across the quiet fields, as though all of Winterfell's lost spirits answered in kind. Night ceded to a bruised dawn broken by 1,000 campfires that smoldered like scattered stars upon the banks of the Green Fork. Mist rolled low across the river plain, veiling sharpened stakes and rows of tethered horses, muffling the clang of blacksmiths already at their anvils. Sansa rose before first light in a borrowed woolen cloak dyed indigo and lined with foxfur at the collar. The garment still bore the faint scent of Myrish lavender, a gift from Lady Meage Mormont whose tent she now shared. The Bear Island lady had bedded down elsewhere, leaving Sansa undisturbed in the little hours. She stepped outside barefoot, toes curling into the cold dew, and listened. Every creak of leather, every jingle of mail, every sleepy growl of a hound felt like the inhalation before a shout. Beyond the outer ring of watchfires glimmered the river itself, broad and sluggish, its far bank rimmed by the dim silhouettes of the twins. Two mighty towers flanking a low watergate, linked by the long stone causeway that had stood since the Age of Heroes. Somewhere within that labyrinth of towers and drawbridges lurked Lord Walder Frey, calculating with rheumy eyes how best to profit from war. Behind Sansa, the camp stirred. Teamsters loaded oat bags into wagons. Boys with half-grown beards laced each other into freshly oiled hauberks while joking in hushed northern dialects. A pair of septons muttered prayers over a chest of tourniquets and salves. Sansa padded through woven hedgerows of spear butts, nodding shyly to any who offered greeting. Many did. They recognized her now. Lady Sansa Stark returned from the south, a living symbol of everything at stake. At the far edge of camp, Gray wind loped between tents, tongue lolling. He spotted her, bounded over and butted her hip. She giggled despite herself, ruffling the direwolf's ruff. His coat smelled of pine and last night's rabbit grease. When she scratched behind one triangular ear, he sighed deep and heavy, then trotted off to resume his silent patrol. Robb's command tent stood near the river, banners furled against dawn's breeze. Through the canvas she heard low voices, Brynden Tully, Roose Bolton, and a gruffer bass that had to be Great John Umber. She waited, but no invitation came, so she withdrew. War councils were for men sworn to swords. Instead she followed the scent of fresh bread to the quartermaster's area, where cooks hacked loaves and salted pork onto wooden trays. She accepted a heel of bread and a cup of small beer, and perched on an overturned shield to eat. The crust flaked warm against her lips, the beer tasted sour-bright, and for a flicker of a moment she felt almost young again, as if seated in Winterfell's kitchens listening to old Nan spin tales of giants. Hagen found her later. His blonde beard bristled with frost. "Milady, Ser Lothier asks if you're ready to ride. We've orders to escort you to the foremost baggage line once the host moves." She nodded, wiping crumbs away. A flutter of unease quickened her pulse. Beyond the banks a horn sounded, a long monotone note, answered by another from the twins. The parley had begun. Hours crawled. Mid-morning sun burned away the mist, leaving the river a ribbon of tarnished silver. At intervals the distant drawbridge cranked down, admitting small groups of northern envoys across the causeway. First riders bearing Karstark badges, then a gaggle of flustered Manderley stewards lugging chests of fine wine and sacks of winter crab. Lady Catelyn herself appeared at midday, sailing across the bridge on a lean gray courser, a contingent of tall-heart spearmen trailing her like geese. Sansa watched, fists clenched, aching to race forward and call her mother's name. But Robb had counseled patience. Negotiations were fragile as spun glass, and even a daughter's cry might shatter the bargain. So she waited in a ferment of hope and dread while strings of fry servants scurried to and fro bearing trays of almond cakes and jugs of sweet water. Each crossing of the drawbridge produced new rumor. Lord Walder demanded hostage sons, or a seat on Robb's council, or certain unnamed concessions. At one point, Great John Umber stomped through camp, red-faced, cursing Freys and fish alike. By late afternoon, the sun shimmered mercilessly off helmets, but the horns at last sounded a soaring, triumphant cadence. A wave of relieved applause rippled through the ranks. Word spread that Lord Walder had granted passage, at a price of marriages and squireships due after the war. Robb emerged astride his stallion, sword held high, and the army thundered approval. Sansa felt the surge in her marrow. Crossing would begin at dawn. Through the remainder of daylight, engineers positioned wooden pontoons to supplement the narrow causeway. Teamsters watered oxen. Smiths checked wheel spokes. Maesters inventoried poppy and leeches. Sansa helped the healers roll bandages, knotting linen strips until her fingers numbed. She listened to Lady Sibel Glover recite herbs for fever, to Septon Wayne mutter that the seven would shelter the just. She thought of father locked in a tower and wondered if justice required swords or supplication. Perhaps both. That night, the sky burned with stars. Fires climbed heavenward, and men sang old marching songs. The Bear and the Maiden Fair, 100 hearts for Ned. The Rains of Castamere mocked with new crude verses. Sansa did not sing. She sat near the river, knees hugged tight, and let the songs roll over her like waves. Somewhere briar lantern moths drifted above scrub grass, their wings glowing faintly blue. She counted them instead of counting fears. Past midnight, she drifted to sleep beneath a wool blanket, back to a supply cart, the river's murmur lullaby. Dreams came. She walked a corridor lit by torches, only each torch snuffed as she neared until she stood in blackest dark. Then a voice, her father's, whispered her name, and she scrambled forward, palms scraping raw, but the floor kept lengthening, and his voice receded. She woke before dawn in sweat, the dream fading like smoke. Trumpets sounded, horses whinnied. Dawn spilled pink gold across the twins. It was time. Ser Lothier and Hagen escorted her to the baggage line, a column of wagons guarded by 100 bowmen under Hallis Mullen. Robb wanted her there, far from the van, yet still moving with the main host. He rode by to check on her, clasped her hand through lacings of his gauntlet, and promised they would speak when across the river. The crossing unfolded with ponderous order. First a spear's wall of tall hearts marching in lockstep, shield edges kissing. Then the outriders of Lord Glover, gray capes snapping. Then carts of whetstones and water. Each unit paused, then clattered across the causeway's slippery flags, boots echoing like thunder in the tunnels beneath the twins. Fry men atop the towers eyed them, crossbows half-raised, vigilant, uncertain allies at best. Sansa's wagon advanced inch by inch. She sat between bales of wool cloaks, peering through slats. When at last they entered the stone throat of the bridge, she felt the weight of masonry overhead, the musky chill, the scurry of unseen vermin. Her breath misted. A single torch sputtered in its bracket halfway along, illuminating old mortar scarred by generations of boot heels. She pressed her fingers to a bale for steadiness, willing her heart to slow. On the far side blazed northern banners rippling proudly. She exhaled only once the wheels rattled onto the southern bank. Camp sprang up anew in meadows mottled by frost. Many hands made swift work. By dusk, pavilions rose in regimented rows and cook fires licked sky blue. Sansa found Robb at the command ring, bent over maps with Catelyn newly returned. Tears sprang to her eyes. She hurried forward. Catelyn's shoulders stiffened. Then she turned, her face gaunt from travel, red-rimmed eyes widening, and mother and daughter collided in fierce embrace. For timeless moments they wept, clung, murmured fragments. Catelyn cupped Sansa's cheeks, smoothing stray hairs, touching her forehead as if to verify she was real. When at last they broke apart, Catelyn's smile trembled between joy and fury. "My brave girl, the gods watched your path. She pressed lips to Sansa's brow. "I vow we shall free your father." That night, Sansa dined with Robb's inner circle. Roasted trouts from the river, barley porridge, dark ale watered for temperance. Catelyn related the terms struck with Lord Walder: hostages to be taken after the war, brides promised to fry sons and heirs. Robb chafed but accepted. Brynden assured him the price was small next to time lost besieging Twin Keeps. Sansa listened, absorbing the calculus of war. Lives tallied, debts promised, a ledger of blood and vows. Before sleep she and Catelyn lingered outside their tent beneath a numb white moon. Catelyn brushed Sansa's hair, humming a northern lullaby. Sansa confessed fears, of waking in chains again, of failing to save father. Catelyn whispered that fear was natural but must serve courage. "We ride to war for those we love," she said. "Love can carve roads where swords alone find bog." The host marched south at dawn, columns stretching miles. Sansa rode near the heart, flanked by Mallin's guard, her mother at her side. The King's Road unfolded long and dusty, shaded occasionally by ash groves where ravens croaked. They passed abandoned farmhouses, pocked by arrows. In ditches lay burnt wagons. War already shadowed the land. At midday gray wind trotted ahead, scouting. When he returned, hackles raised, Robb halted the column. Scouts reported burned fields beyond a hedgerow and butchered cattle left to rot. Clear sign of Ser Gregor Clegane's reavers. Sansa felt the men around her stiffen. The mountain's name carried terror north of the neck now. Robb dispatched outriders to track his path while the army detoured west to avoid poisoned wells. For a fortnight, they advanced thus, marching sunrise to sunset, resting by streams, weathering spring storms that soaked wool and rusted clasps. Sansa walked often beside wagons to spare Daisy's back, boots crusted with clay. She learned the names of river flowers: starwort, pink yarrow, queen's tears. She traded mending for stories. Ser Perwyn Fry reciting the Seven's miracle at Maidenpool, Lady Mormont describing snow bears the size of barns. She discovered that laughter still existed even under looming battle. News traveled via Raven. The Lannisters razed Fairmarket. Edmure Tully held the ford. Tarbolton burned. Northern scouts captured a merchant who'd fled the capital. From him, they learned Jeor Mormont's letter to Winterfell. The Night's Watch begged men. Yet the world below the neck cared little for frozen ramparts when gold cloaks paraded heads upon pikes. Sansa sickened hearing of traitors' heads displayed outside the September. Her father's not among them, though rumors placed him daily nearer the chopping block. One afternoon, near the village of Endall, the host paused to water horses. Sansa wandered to a babbling brook bordered by rowan saplings. She knelt, cupped water to her lips, cold, sweet, tinged with iron. When she straightened, a girl no older than Arya peeked over a boulder. Ragged shift, muddy feet, hair matted. Startled, Sansa smiled gently. "Hello," she ventured. The girl stared, wild-eyed, then darted away. Moments later she returned, thrusting forth a sprig of bluebells. "For the lady," she whispered in a Riverlands accent. Sansa accepted, pressing them between palms. "Thank you." She offered a strip of dried apple. The child snatched it, devoured. Tears welled in those hollow eyes. War had emptied larders. Flowers were all she had left to give. Sansa told this to her mother, and that night Catelyn ordered loaves distributed to the villagers. She let Sansa ride with the wagon delivering bread. Amid crumbling cottages, mothers sobbed gratitude. Old men blessed the old gods and the Seven. Small hands tugged at Sansa's cloak, asking if she was the wolf princess. She knelt, kissing brows, feeling warmth bloom where fear once nested. The North was more than armies, it was people. Days bled into weeks. The Green Fork curved east, silver under moonlight. Ravens brought tidings of Jaime Lannister besieging Riverrun. The Warden of the West himself commanded. Robb quickened march. Scouts urged the host to the red hills beyond Acorn Water. One dawn the horizon erupted with iron thunder. Drums, horns, banners of lion and trout clashing in smoky distance. The whisper of first battle rode the air. Robb summoned Sansa that evening. His armor lay on a trestle, lacquered plates engraved with direwolf vines. He regarded her solemnly. "Tomorrow we break east and hit Ser Jaime's flank. Our outriders will engage first. Hallis Malin escorts you rearward to a safe ridge." She shook her head. "I will not hide behind wagons while father's fate is contested." Robb's jaw tightened. "The line will be chaotic. I cannot guard you and command. You cannot spare men to drag me to safety either," she countered. "Let me ride with the healers. I can carry water, tearcloth. If I must see wounds, so be it. Better than wondering." He studied her, pride warring with dread. Finally he nodded once. "Stay near Maester Luwin. Obey him." Morning came crimson as spilled wine. Battle unfurled like storm clouds. Arrows hissing, war horns keening. Cavalry thundering across Redrock gullies. From a ridge dotted with alder, Sansa helped Luwin mix pouches of boneset and willow bark. She tore linen strips until her fingers bled. Wounded poured in, Karstark footmen with arrow shafts protruding. Tall heart archers burned by pitch, a Glover bannerman cradling the mangled stump of his wrist. She met pain with steadiness she did not know she possessed, pressing cloth to spurting femorals, whispering Winterfell lullabies to men vomiting bile. The copper tang of blood coated her tongue. She lost count of prayers murmured. Each new groan she answered with fresh water, a cool hand on fevered brow. Once she paused to retch behind a cart, tears streaking. Then she returned. Through the din she glimpsed the battle below. Robb's center driving forward, gray wind leaping at screaming destriers, Lannister spears buckling beneath pine and iron shields. Noon sun burned away earlier mists, revealing Jaime Lannister himself cutting a path of brilliance, white cloak streaming, golden armor ablaze. He fought like a storm, yet the northern press coiled around him inexorably. She could not hear, but she felt the host's roar when he fell from his rearing stallion and vanished beneath a crush of fighters. Dust hung in the air long after horns finally called retreat. When the last Lannister pocket surrendered, silence bloomed, heavy, ringing, broken only by crackle of burning siege wagons. Sansa sank to her knees among blood-soaked blankets, exhaustion hollowing her bones. Luwin clasped her shoulder. "You have done 10 healers' work, my lady." She stared at her own hands, caked crimson, palms wrinkled from water. "I fear I will dream of screams," she whispered. Luwin's eyes glistened. "Dreams are the price the living pay." He rose to tend another soldier. Dusk settled like ashes. Fires dotted the field, roasting meat for survivors, yet the stench of carrion overpowered. Robb arrived, dust-speckled, eyes bright with battle fever. He embraced Sansa, heedless of gore on her cloak. "We have Ser Jaime captive," he breathed. "Half the Lannister host broken. Word will carry to King's Landing like wildfire." Sansa looked past him to carts bearing bodies under shrouds, and thought of Queen Cersei's cunning, of Joffrey's cruelty. Would they trade father for their shining knight? Or would their wrath grow monstrous? Her heart beat a grim pattern. Hope, dread, hope. That night, thunderheads gathered. Lightning flickered on the horizon, and rain swept through as if the gods sought to wash the field clean. Sansa lay awake in damp pavilion, listening to drops drum upon canvas. Across the camp, prisoners groaned in chains. She wondered if Jaime Lannister felt regret. She doubted it. At dawn, ravens took wing bearing letters penned by Catelyn's hand. News of victory, of prisoner exchange demanded. One bird flew to King's Landing, claws gripping parchment sealed with a direwolf impressed beside the trout of House Tully. Sansa watched its silhouette diminish into sunrise. May it fly straight. They marched again, slower now, nursing wounds. Rain lingered for days, turning the King's Road to a sludge that sucked boots. Sansa rode in a covered wagon tending fevers. She learned to detect mortifying infection by smell, to cool delirious brow with vinegar. She braided a little straw doll to distract a wounded boy. When the boy died that night, she slipped the doll into his stiff fingers before the pyre was lit. One evening, Camped near an abandoned sept, a horn blast summoned officers. A raven from Riverrun bore grave news. Lord Hoster Tully failing, requests for his daughters. Catelyn prepared to ride with a small guard. She hugged Sansa tight. "You remain with Robb," she instructed. "He needs every voice of home." Tears shone in her eyes. "Send ravens if father's fate shifts." Sansa watched her mother's party depart beneath a cold moon, their torches bobbing like fireflies along the road. Alone, she returned to her tent, hugged knees, and finally let sobs shake her chest until sleep stole them. When morning dawned clear, Robb summoned her. In his hand, he held a scroll with the seal broken. His face was ashen. He closed the flap behind her and spoke only 4 words. "The king is dead." For a heartbeat, she thought he meant Joffrey, but Robb's tone told a deeper grief. Her stomach free fell. "Father," she whispered. Robb shook his head numb. "King Robert.
À un digne accident.
Cersei rules as Queen Regent." And his voice cracked. "They executed Lord Eddard." The words fell like winter's first heavy snow, silent, inexorable, suffocating. Sansa's breaths turned shallow. She steadied herself on a tent pole. "No," she said, but the denial rang hollow even to her ears. "They promised trial. They promised mercy for confession. They lied." She felt a distant scream building but held it behind locked teeth. Instead, she sank onto a stool. Cold raced through her limbs until she shook. Robb knelt, arms encircling her though his own shoulders trembled. She pressed her forehead against his steel gorget, tasting salt of tears that were his or hers or both. When she could speak, her voice sounded far away. "Mother must not yet know. A raven flies." He swallowed hard. "We shall have justice. The Lannisters will bleed for this." The words should have roared righteous, yet to Sansa they echoed emptily. No blood could return father's laugh, his steady hand on her shoulder. Yet war might claim more Robb Arya Rickon. She lifted her face, eyes red-rimmed. "Justice without ending the world," she murmured. "We must find another way." Robb rose, fists curling. "Another way died with him. They will fear us now." She watched him stride out, cloak snapping, a young wolf tasting vengeance. Alone, Sansa whispered the prayer she had learned at Winterfell's heart tree. She prayed for father's soul, for mother's strength, for Arya's safety amid chaos. She prayed for Robb's heart not to grow iron. And she prayed for her own. Shattered glass scattered across a battlefield of memories. Rain began again, soft, relentless, drumming on the canvas overhead like muffled applause after a tragedy none wished to see. Sansa rose, wiped tears, belted her cloak. Outside, camp buzzed with murmurs of execution, voices edging toward fury. She steadied a passerby, offered a cup of broth. Work would anchor her. Luwin waved from the healer's tent. More fever cases. She went to the wounded, to the living, because the dead needed no tending. While she cleaned a gash on a tall heart lad's thigh, she hummed softly, an old lullaby her father once whistled in the gardens. The boy, pale from pain, managed a faint smile. Thus the wheel turned. Death, grief, service, song. And through it all, steel sharpened inside her. Not the flash of a blade, but the unyielding edge of resolve. She would not shatter. She would bend, weave, endure. She would carry her father's honor not in banners or sanguine war cries, but in every act of mercy, every word of hard truth spoken to power, every quiet refusal to become a monster in vengeance's name. When night fell, gray wind padded beside her as she walked the perimeter. The river hissed beyond reeds, swollen with rain. She tossed the dire wolf a strip of jerky. He caught it midair, eyes gleaming. She stroked his coarse fur, feeling the living heat beneath. In that moment, she imagined herself armored in fur and frost, a she-wolf who had shed her cage of guilt. Far south, in a city of marble and malice, a lion queen preened over her triumph, and a boy king clutched blood-crusted steel. But Sansa Stark of Winterfell still breathed under the open sky, still walked paths of her choosing. And fate fickle though it was, could be guided by those who dared steer it. She lifted her gaze to the North Star peering through cloud rifts and whispered into the chill. I will not forget, I will not forgive, but I will endure. The star winked in silent oath, and the night yawned vast and dark around her, full of terrors, full of tomorrows.